Welcome to the Actual Fluency podcast. Each week you'll find inspirational, motivational interviews with some of the world's best language learners, industry experts, all trying to help you to learn foreign languages better, faster, and more efficiently. And here we go. If you're looking for a language teacher to enhance your language learning, then I highly recommend italki. Italki is the world's biggest tutoring platform, and you can find thousands of teachers and tutors at very reasonable prices. Get a free lesson after completing your first lesson by going to languageteacher.co. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 152 of the Actual Fluency podcast. Today I'm joined by Norbert from ecolinguist.com. He's a Polish teacher, linguist, traveler, and a polyglot, so it's really nice to have Norbert on. He actually taught me some Hungarian when I was living in Budapest. I think the only reason that I didn't continue doing that was because I left the country and I didn't really have any need to continue learning Hungarian. But now he focuses mostly on Polish. And in this episode, we get into how he became a language teacher in the first place, his own language learning experiences, and what methods and techniques that are actually useful to learn languages and what is underrated. So do check out this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, Norbert, welcome to the Actual Fluency podcast. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today.
It's great to be here.
We're very welcome. Do you want to start out by giving the listeners just a little idea of who you are, where you're from, and how you got started in languages?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Norbert. I'm from Poland, and I'm known on the internet mostly as a Polish teacher these days. However, I also do a lot of content creation. I have my YouTube channel, and I got into languages quite a while ago, like pretty much in high school. My passion started there with learning English, and then I just started expanding, learning Hungarian and then traveling around the world and realizing that I can teach people my native language, and that's how it all started.
Fantastic. And when did you first start traveling, and what, did you have a job, or did you just take a backpack and go?
Well, my first big travel abroad was when I went to Scotland to study there. I studied anthropology in Aberdeen. And studying anthropology made me realize that I really want to go out and explore other countries, like outside of Europe. So after a year of living in Scotland, I went to India, Sri Lanka, and I was exploring that area of the world a little bit. And after that, I came back to Europe, I finished my studies and started exploring Southeast Asia for a while, and now I'm living in Mexico. So there is a lot of adventures on the way.
Wow, yeah, I can see already that you're quite traveled. But you decided not to go into anthropology as a career, or?
No, actually, it's very funny because it had always been my dream to study anthropology and studying different cultures in high school and all. And then when I studied that, I realized that languages is actually what I'm really excited about, because it's something more practical, and it's something that helps you connect with other cultures better. So I just switched and I did my Hungarian studies instead. I went back to Poland and finished my Hungarian degree.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good that you figured it out so you could finish the degree you wanted, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I just love languages because it's, when you're learning it, you're actually seeing the results like almost immediately. Because when you're studying anthropology, you're reading about theories, you're reading about, mostly adventures of other people who went to explore other cultures. And I realized, no, I just want to experience it on my own.
Right.
And language is like the best way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, you want to build your own adventures, really.
Yeah. And also like just formatting your brain just through acquiring all these languages. It just transforms the way you think, and it's just amazing.
To take us through the experience from starting with English Was that a classic school teaching, or did you have any sort of unusual methods or teachers or someone that would push you towards, let's say, good results or different ways of studying?
Yeah, I started learning English at school when I was like 13, which was already kind of late, you could say. And we didn't really have a lot of resources. It was before the internet and everything. So you were just relying on your teachers' materials and stuff like that at school. And I truly started getting into English and taking charge of my learning process when I was like 17. And I realized that I cannot rely on the school system because they're not teaching me anything or they're slowing me down. So I got some private lessons and went to like a private school, private language school, and we had a very good teacher there, and she kind of inspired me. She was a polyglot, and it was just amazing. Like to meet her. She was from Belarus, and she proved to us that you can learn so many languages. You just need to put work into it. And I was just kind of dealing with the resources that I had, like I was handling them somehow, taking notes, writing one word hundreds of times. It wasn't very efficient, but I didn't know better at that time.
Right.
But it worked somehow,
Yeah, I guess if you do it enough, anything will work, really.
Yeah, if you put a lot of effort into it and you really want to learn, like you're gonna learn, like no matter what methods you use.
And what did you learn from her in terms of methods or any other way of learning?
So obviously over the years when I started picking up different languages, I realized that what's most important is spending time with the language. Like you actually have to spend time learning it, enjoying it, consuming content in that language. And after learning English at university, I also studied at my Hungarian studies. We had English classes, so I picked up a lot of academic language there. And then the breakthrough was when I went to Scotland to study anthropology, and I actually had to use English to learn about something that I've never learned before. That was a breakthrough. Like my English just went up so quickly.
Right, because you had a reason to maybe for diving in at the deep end.
Yeah, and also, when I was studying English at school, everything was about passing the exams and getting certificates and stuff like that. Nobody cared about like what you're actually going to use this language for. But in Scotland, when I went to lectures and I had to write essays, I just had to use this language to express my ideas or show what I've learned and stuff like that. So even though I made a lot of grammatical mistakes or vocabulary mistakes, I got good grades, which was very inspiring because the teacher said, well, like we had to take some points away from you because of the grammatical mistakes, but your ideas were okay. Like you the way you think is fine. So it's a good essay at the end of the day. Like, and then
I wish more teachers was like that,
because it was like it wasn't testing me on my English; it was testing me on something else, and that was like a breakthrough in the way I thought about the language. Like it's not about performing best; it's about thinking and having your ideas and expressing those ideas and communicating with people, learning new things. This is what matters most, not necessarily being perfect,
Yeah, and it's funny, it's completely opposite in most schools today where you start in, let's say you're maybe, I don't know, 8 years old or something when you start a foreign language in average, and they test you on grammar and like words and stuff, but they don't actually reward people actually speaking or using the language. So if you can pass the test, then in their view, you've done well. You've actually completed what the course is about. But in reality, those students can't do anything outside the classroom. They can't speak. They can't understand. Well, they might understand like written text because that's what they, at least in
Hmm.
my school, they used to do a lot of. So wouldn't it be a great school system if it was all about producing language, even if it had grammatical mistakes in it, as long as you were understood, you get good grades and like really reward people for trying.
Oh, that would be an ideal, really. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing that people after going through the school system, they are they have very low self-esteem and they afraid of speaking, or they think that they're doing something wrong, when they write an essay and the result of mistakes in them. Like, yeah, you made mistakes, but your ideas were right. Like, you said what you wanted to say. You had something to say, and that's really that matters more than being able to say like 100% correct with no mistakes. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the mindset we really should try to promote. But yeah, the school system is a bit more rigid. It doesn't
takes a
change so
long time
fast.
to change. Yeah. But for me, that's the greatest pleasure is actually having some useful language I can go out and use with people. And even if I make a lot of mistakes, as long as they understand what I'm saying, for me, that's really exciting and fun and makes it all worth it. Whereas understanding words or doing flashcards or all these things, I mean, it doesn't really add to anything. It's just numbers on a screen, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's all about experience, experience of speaking in a foreign language. Like it's supposed to enrich your life somehow. And
Mm.
whatever you do it, like I know people, because I used to live in Scotland, and I know people, like older people, Polish people who are living there, and their English is really bad. They just know few words. But I worked with them, and the native speakers loved them because of their character and because the way they were able to communicate in verbally. They were just
Mm.
so nice, even though they they didn't really speak English. And that's amazing. Like someone is functioning in this foreign language environment and is able to connect with others with limited English.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic when that happens. And just giving that it's just a positive reinforcement of what you're doing is correct or it's the right way, and hopefully that will help them also improve their English and get to a higher level and get even more out of it because the benefits go both ways, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like my experience in Mexico now is very similar because my Spanish really got way better after a year of just being here, and that's another method I'm testing here, the immersion one.
Mm.
And I'm just surprised like how much I've learned over the year without actually studying in a very structured way. Just being here, listening into conversations of my friends, and a few weeks ago I had a chat with a friend who doesn't speak English at all. And we spent 2 hours talking about her broken heart, for 2 hours.
Mm.
And we were able to do that in Spanish fully. And I knew I made a lot of mistakes, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, so how long have you been learning Spanish, and how did you what kind of preparations did you do before you went on your trip?
Well, it's just, yeah, I've been learning for over a year just by being here. Before, I just did some attempts, maybe trying to watch some videos or something on YouTube, or trying to read materials for Spanish learners, but it never really worked. Like I was never really interested in learning in that way. But I had some
Mm.
friends. I had some friends in Scotland from Spain, and their English wasn't that great, so they always like mixed it up, and I was just picking it up somehow. Maybe because
Right.
English and Spanish is kind of similar. At least to me, I can see a lot of similarities.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I also just try to read what people are trying to say from the context, and always
Right.
looking for the way to connect somehow.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to hear that you had such a good, or almost, it sounds effortless. I'm sure it's different when you're in there, but for me, immersion can be tough because it's like there's a bigger pressure on you
Hmm.
to actually, when you're there, it's like, yeah, you have the free sort of impressions of signs and everything. And if you know people there, obviously that's a great resource. But I think a lot of people, maybe if they're a little bit shy or something, they find it very intimidating to be in a completely foreign environment and having to, being told something like, if you just listen or if you just, immerse yourself, then it will come to you. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like before I came here, I was very skeptical about immersion. Like I was thinking that it can't really work like this. Like it cannot be that effortless, you know. And I would never recommend anyone to just go and learn that. But maybe because of my linguistic background, you know, I study languages. I kind of I'm more sensitive to the structure of the language, and
Speak multiple languages to begin with. That's always a good help.
yeah, that's a good help. And then I started with a friend here who spoke English, and we were connecting through English. And but he started taking me out to introduce me to his friends, and they would just speak Spanish because most of his friends they don't speak English, and I would
Mm,
be sitting there, and they were like great people. I really felt really good in their company, but I was able just to listen in and wait that maybe someone will ask me something in English or not. But I was kind of forced, and I saw the opportunity that this is this is how immersion works and how you am I supposed to learn. But I was kind of getting frustrated after a while
mm,
because I'm listening in. I kind of understand what they're talking about, and I'm just coming up with this answer, what I want to say, and I want to just join into discussion. But by the time I'm ready to say something, they already moved on to another topic. So it's kind of weird to, oh, by the way, I have something to add to the previous conversation. You know, it was,
right.
but this mental process, I think, and my brain just wanted to participate in those interactions that my brain started to kind of suck the language in, you know, absorb it faster because it knew that if you're not gonna learn anything, you're not gonna participate in those discussions. You're gonna be alienated and lonely and sad. So I think my brain just kind of started to be more sensitive
Right.
to
Yeah, it's all
Spanish
about
words.
experience at the end, right? Isn't it? Like the experiences you have, if that was your first foreign language, let's say you're American and you went down to Mexico and did the same thing, you might have had a very different experience just because you don't have that initial experience.
Hmm.
Maybe not. Who knows? I mean, it could be the same. Yeah.
I mean, initial experience of having learned other languages.
Yeah, or just knowing other languages, having more reference points, or just the confidence that you can actually learn another language to begin with.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those are, in my book, almost essential. And I think that's a big reason that a lot of people don't learn languages because they feel like they cannot do it. And so they won't even try because they maybe had a bad experience in school, or maybe they don't know anyone who's done it in their community, or, but you had those advantages. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's impossible for other people, but it's important to put everything in context and understand that you have advantage. We all have advantages, really, and if you want to reproduce good results, I think if you haven't had experience of learning another language, maybe more preparation before the trip. I don't know what you think. Um,
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, definitely. Because before coming to Mexico, I already picked up English, and also I had been living in Scotland in the English-speaking country, so I kind of absorbed a lot of English there just by being
yeah,
there, and I realized that I learned much more just by being there, having this kind of bedrock from school. But I went there and I started absorbing words like this is important, this is important. And I don't even remember exactly how I learned learned it. Sometimes I just know words that I heard once and somehow I remembered it.
So would you say you're actively listening you're not just casually, you're actually trying to pick words from things you hear that you can either use yourself or understand right away?
Yeah, but I'm also not forcing myself to speak so much here. Like, especially now, I kind of start conversations in Spanish because I'm living in a part of Mexico that on the streets, people would never start talking to you in English. Like, they always start in Spanish.
Right.
No matter how you look like, they're just gonna start with Spanish. So I tend to speak Spanish more on the streets, but yeah, I lost my train of thought. What we were talking about?
Yeah, so we were talking about the advantages of having the multilingual background and just using it, or whether you actively listened for the things that you were looking for.
Actively listening. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. I was listening into conversations like consciously, and after a while, I got exhausted, and I was saying like maybe I just have to stop because it's really exhausting. But it's almost like a workout, like you just doing it, you getting tired, and then you just have to take a rest. But I think that's how I learned, just forcing myself to listen in and trying to break those words down. And I was forced by the social situation as well.
Right. That's always helpful. But it sounds a little bit like what Michel Thomas said was, don't try to remember. Like, obviously listen. I mean, you need to listen, otherwise you will never hear anything. But if you try and force yourself, oh, I have to remember this, then you don't. But if you take it easy and just kind of let the words come to you, then it's much easier to remember things.
Yeah, it's almost effortless process. But I wouldn't say that learning any language is effortless or something. Spanish is kind of similar to English, and there is so many other ways that I can communicate with people here, and also the culture is maybe more similar to where I come from. But if you wanted to learn Chinese or Japanese, I don't think immersion would work as efficiently.
Right.
It's just almost impossible because the roots of the words are different and the culture is different, so people tend to talk about different things.
Right. Then you need to basically prepare a lot more before you go and have a high level when you arrive.
Yeah, maybe intermediate. I think so. Hungarian is an example of a language that is very different. Like you can't figure it out without knowing what it means. And before going to Hungary for the first time, I already had intermediate level of Hungarian. So when I went there, I was so surprised. After studying Hungarian there for 1 month intensely in a summer school, which was all in Hungarian, I was able to kind of jump 1 year up at university. Like they were able to transcribe my certificate from there because I gained so much Hungarian just by being there for 1 month and learning intensely 6 hours a day, all in Hungarian. So
that's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. And when did you start to get into teaching? Was that on your travels or?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about my career, what I want to do, and I was also trying to make my lifestyle more mobile so I could travel around the world. And I started teaching languages, English, Polish, Hungarian, online, just to kind of get me going. And then I realized that I really loved it. I loved it so much that I decided that it's going to be my career and I really want to make a change in this field, because it was pretty young when I started this field, this thing of teaching or learning languages with teachers online.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw the potential, and now I've built my own company that is trying to optimize language learning experience with teachers online.
We'll just take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, italki, but we'll be right back. On this podcast, I've interviewed hundreds of language learners, some of the world's greatest polyglots and industry experts. And one thing they all agree on is the value of one-to-one tutoring lessons. And for this, I highly recommend italki. They have thousands of teachers in all price ranges, and they even have certified teachers who have taken diplomas or have degrees in the language you're learning. So whether you're just brushing up on your Italian ahead of a trip to Rome, or you want to master Russian to take the exam, or whatever your goals are in languages, italki has a tutor suitable for you. And compared to private tutoring offline, it's really affordable. You can find informal tutors down to $5 an hour, and you can have trial lessons for even less. So if you want to master a language from the comfort of your own home, and you even get a $10 credit when you complete your first lesson, go to languageteacher.co and check out italki. It might be the best thing you do for your language learning this year. But let's go back a little bit just to give people a better understanding of how you get started, because obviously you've gone through it. So a lot of people want to know, I love languages, or I'm a big fan of languages. I want to make it into like a full-time thing, or at least something to support my lifestyle, or maybe travel around. I mean, people have a lot of ambitions when it comes to travel, because they feel like, oh, I want to travel, see the world, use my language skills, but then how to pay for it is actually comes to mind. So if somebody's sitting out there listening and they are thinking about becoming a teacher, what would be your tips for them to get started, and what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so, I just started on italki. I became a tutor there, and I was just offering those conversation practice lessons, and it's kind of fine. It's just like you can't really make a lot of money doing that. I wouldn't say that it's a safe kind of path to go for a teacher, because it's not very stable. You never know how many students you're gonna get, and only after being there for a long time, you establish yourself as a good teacher. You will get more students. Maybe you can raise your prices. But I would rather say that it's more like a side job. You would rather want to have something, the income from somewhere else, unless you are really into it and you want to build your own methodology, or you want to establish yourself as the expert in this particular language and maybe reach for a bigger audience.
Right.
But it takes years, I would say, or maybe no. In the internet, like, you can make maybe like overnight success. Sometimes you might go viral one day, but it's more of a luck. It's a strike of luck. Otherwise, it's just hard work. You have to be there all the time, and you have to have a strategy for growth. Because if you are they're just short term, and because you want to pay for your travels, you can do it, but it's not going to be your career. It's just something that supplements your lifestyle for a while. But at some point, you will want to have some stability. You will want to, pay the contributions for your retirement, or think about your future, and that's also very important, to
I
consider
think that's
that.
true. Like, there's a big difference between being an online teacher or tutor and then having an online teaching or tutoring career. And I definitely agree with you that the second is much, much harder, because you suddenly, to get, let's say, a full-time income, you might have to have a lot of lessons. And because it's like one-on-one, it's very draining mentally to do one-on-one lessons, I think, as a teacher. Like 40 hours a week would be, for me, impossible.
Yes, it's impossible.
It's just your brain is just fried, I think. So maybe, I guess, what people could do if they wanted to, for this kind of starting point is to you go to cheaper countries, like stay a couple of months or years in places where you can get a cheap room or something, and then use that as a traveling background. But you're right that it's not really it's a good starting point. I think if you look at what a lot of teachers have accomplished, like yourself, you're building a website and a brand and a lot of content that can definitely grow to way more than full time. You see someone like, Benny Lewis, or some of these people have been essentially blogging for a while, and then suddenly they build courses and books and they get deals with all kinds of stuff. But you're right that the time is is a big time investment. I think Benny's been blogging for 10 years now.
Exactly. Yes.
So some people are like, oh wow, he just did this and then he got all this, and it's like, yeah, well, if you write blog posts like every week for 5 years, I'll promise you'll get somewhere. I can't promise you to get become a millionaire or anything, but you'll definitely get somewhere. But what we can say is, not to discourage people completely, is that I would say a teaching or tutoring start is a great foundation to build something that could become like a lifestyle business or some kind of full-time pay. Something like converting your lessons into a course that's always available, writing a book, or if I had to give coaching to teachers, I would say something like, I would look at how you can make what you do one-on-one available so you didn't have to be there. So like take what you teach people in the lessons, maybe even use lesson examples like recordings from your lessons, and then set it up on a free course platform like Teachable. And then if you spend maybe 1 hour selling it for every 10 hours you teach, maybe you'll get a few sales here and there, and eventually you can build more courses, you can make more sales, and then you can take yourself out of that one-on-one time spent in the long run. But obviously I'm simplifying it a lot here, but that just to give people some ideas of how you can go from teaching to potentially being on a more passive income, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. You can scale but the only thing here is that your commitment. Like, are you really committed to this way of life, and you really want to add value to the community of people who are learning your language? Because but again, so it really depends on your goals. If you just want to travel and you want to get extra income, you can absolutely do that. Like, you can even run like that for many years, just giving classes online, like conversational classes, especially if you're an English speaker. There is ton of work for English speakers,
Yeah.
You can do that. It's just good to think at some point, you want to think about long term, like what do you want to do with your life, and as you said, like you can move to a more affordable country to kind of start your career. That's kind of what I did.
Adventure
as well. Like, I'm living in Mexico and I feel much more comfortable here than in Europe, because I don't have to stress out so much about how many students I have. And the time that I save, I can put into my business and thinking about how I can add more value to my customers, my students. What can I deliver? Maybe the video courses and stuff like that. But it's all started with this tutoring, on italki. And
right. But how will you know if you like it if you don't start?
Exactly.
You have to give it a try.
I didn't realize that I really wanted to be a Polish teacher, and I didn't realize that there is so much to do and to contribute to this online teaching world. It's
right.
There is so much to do that anybody can find something to do for themselves and to specialize in something or find their own niche. You just need to keep an open mind, I'd say.
Yeah. So what were the next steps for you in your teaching career? You started on italki as a tutor, probably on the cheaper side, I would imagine, that many people do. And what kind of evolution did you do then? You said it was mostly speaking practice then. Does that mean you're doing a bit more organized teaching now, or what kind of evolution have you made as a teacher yourself?
Yeah, so I started with just speaking practice because it was the easiest thing to do. But then I realized that those people who were coming to me to practice speaking, they had so many other problems that they didn't have any solution for. So I just listened to them. I started keeping the record of what they really need and what's their problems as online language learners, and started developing solutions to those problems. So one of the things is that often they just got underwhelmed with the amount of content available online. Like, you can learn a language by yourself if you really want to, but just digging through all this content on the internet about it, it just takes away the pleasure of learning it, because you read a lot of stuff and some of it is useless, some of it is very useful. You don't know but you never know what you're gonna get.
Right.
So I'm just trying to think ahead what my students need to know and let them know before they drift away and lose their motivation because of the overload of content. So I'm pretty much curating content for them, making sure that whatever I'm sending them to go through is of good quality. I also produce my own content for them if they need that. If they need some shadowing, I'm not telling them just go and do shadowing. This is this technique, that's how you do it. I would listen to them and produce an exercise for them that incorporates shadowing, but it's easy to follow because I've thought of the process of how they actually go about it.
Right.
So I would create like a video exercise for them that they can do shadowing that way. They don't have to figure it out by themselves. I just give them tools to do it.
Right. So these things happen outside the lessons, or is that in the lesson?
Yeah. So that's something extra that I do for my students. Like during the lesson, that's a bit different thing. We focus on speaking or getting comprehensible input, which means that I can tell you a story or something using visual aids, but the story is adapted to your level because I know you. I've been working with you for a while. Or you've been learning from me from the very beginning. So I'm building things up for you. I'm creating stories or lesson plans for you specifically, what you need to learn.
Right. Can you give like a really simple example for the teacher, for the aspiring teachers out there, maybe on how that looks like? Is it just a quick example, just to make it a little bit more practical?
A bit more practical. Well, definitely use of slides is very helpful if it's used in the right way. You could use, you can make a slide deck that and try to take your when you're creating the slide deck, think about the mental process that your student is going through looking at it. So the most challenging part of it is changing your perspective. You need to think about what your student is going through, not what you think he's going through.
Right.
So collecting feedback is very important. So how could I explain that? Maybe that didn't make sense. It didn't make sense when I said that.
It does make sense. There's absolutely no problem. But it's just if you hear it and you're not, let's say you're not a teacher or you don't make these kind of activities, it sounds like, oh yeah, just do this, just do that, and it's not there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, what does it look like? What do I, as a student, what do I get? Is it you write a story from A to B, or do you go online and find like a cartoon and go through, or like if you're a teacher, I guess I can ask you in a different question, is how do you develop yourself as a teacher from that conversation practice teacher to like someone who produces content like you do and really supports them outside the lessons. Because just getting them more stuff, I don't know. To me, that sounds difficult if I was to do it.
Yes. So I see two things that you just asked. The first one is the whole process of creating a story for a student, right? Sometimes I use cartoons or clips from movies, Polish movies or stuff like that, but it's for more advanced students. But for beginners, the story, usually stories, we think of stories that it's something very complex or very long. It doesn't have to be very long.
Right.
You can have a very short story about someone who needs something, you know, especially in Polish. We have different noun genders of nouns. So,
Right.
and depending of what you need, the word will change depending on the gender of the noun. So you can prepare a story where the person needs something of different gender, just to help people kind of develop that intuition, what changes,
right,
and why.
So do you go based on like do you have like a plan for each student, or is it just the student seems to be struggling with this week, so this is what I'm focusing on? Or do you have like a grand plan for them to improve sort of in an organized way?
So at this point, I already have like a grand plan because I've worked with enough students to kind of to have it already developed, you know. But at the same time, different students make different progress in different times. So I can speed it up or I can adapt it a little bit. You always need to listen to your student and personalize your lessons. And
right.
you know, you hear a lot that everybody personalizes their lessons for you, but at the end of the day, they're not really personalizing it to the extent that they could be personalizing it because it takes a lot of time.
Right.
So that's something extra. And as you said, like, how is it possible that I can do it outside? I spend so much time outside of the lesson to prepare it. And me, from the perspective of a teacher, I think about what is the highest value I can provide to my student, you know? And and then I'm not thinking about, oh, I'm spending too much time on this. Like, that's the matter of like maybe how much you charge for your classes. But don't let, I mean, at least I don't. I believe that I'm in it for a long run. So whatever time I spend on preparing materials, I'm going to get it back at some point, I believe, because I'm going to produce something of great value. And it's just going to come back to me later on once everything is kind of produced and students have a choice and they can reach for that highest value, you know. They have a choice. I create a choice for them.
Yeah, and as a teacher, I guess you're saving up all those materials so you have them for future students, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yes, definitely. I can adjust every material to a student, but I keep it organized. That's another aspect, keeping your things organized and having your content organized in the way that is easy to follow for your students. It's very important because one of the biggest problems I had in the past as a student or a teacher was when I get my notes sent over to me by email with all the files or exercises or PDFs, and it's just so easy to lose them, you know. Or just you miss the email or something and the student comes to the class unprepared because of that. So I decided, no, we cannot keep doing that. We have to solve that problem, that it's part of the experience of a lesson, that your content is organized, and that's up to me as a teacher. I'm doing it. I'm making sure that your content is organized, and when you look at it, you are not confused.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's the it puts the responsibility of the teacher again, which is this also something Michel Thomas said. If the student doesn't remember, then Michel Thomas believed that it was the teacher's fault, and the teacher will fix it. Obviously, we shouldn't rely entirely on our teachers, because then we don't get any work done outside the lessons. But I think it's a good point that if you look at it from the teacher's perspective, you are basically there to ensure their success. And the best way to do that is making them, the students, only have to worry about the language itself, not saving PDFs or, I don't know, organizing all this stuff. So I think that's definitely a good thing to highlight. And also, that's the way you increase your value as a teacher. And that's the way you go from, making, let's say, a few dollars an hour for conversation practice, and you can grow all the way. I don't even know what the maximum is on italki now, maybe $40 an hour or something, which I'm sure there are people charging for specialty languages and packages. So if you do provide that value outside the course, not only do you get better students and better results, but you also are able to grow your hourly from that starting point, which is a little bit low, I would say, probably. But I think you should look at it as an investment, right? And as you get better as a teacher, as you get more students, you can increase those rates.
Yes, and Michel Thomas is a great inspiration to me, really. I love his methods, although these days we can really take it a step further, because of the technology we have. But definitely he started something very important. And in terms of teacher having the responsibility of teaching a student or organizing things for him, I would compare it to like a gym instructor, someone that obviously you have to go to the gym and do your workout. Like nobody can do it for you.
Right.
But before I came to Mexico, I had been struggling and trying to pull myself together to go to the gym, because I knew that that's good for me, right? But I just couldn't. I just had no idea what to do there, and I felt too lazy to do the research. What would I be supposed to do there? And then I moved to Mexico, and my roommate, he started going to the gym, and he was very knowledgeable about it, and he kind of talked me into it. After a month, I joined him, and that was incredible, because he told me everything. On the way to the gym, he would explain to me what diet I need to follow. Then at the gym, he showed me all the exercises I need to do. And I just keep going, just following his instructions. And sometimes he joins me, he adds some things to what he said before. And it's working for me perfectly. But I would have never started it without him. I see him as my gym instructor, someone who told me what to do. And I just had to trust him, and I kept doing, and he kept me motivated to do it. So your language teacher is someone like that too, because you have to do the work.
Yeah.
But if someone is telling you exactly what you have to do in terms of like, this is the diet that you need to follow, and you see the results as well, because if the gym instructor is good looking and healthy and happy, you want to be like him, right? So
of course, yeah.
So I think I see a lot of equivalence there. A language teacher and a gym instructor, someone who keeps you going.
Yeah, because you can't force people to do it if they don't have that interest themselves. Like, you can't just download a language to your brain yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but people want to learn a language, but they just don't know how, and just this exploration of how to learn it, or what content to consume, what exercises to do is just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
That you're not gonna do it unless someone will come and say, this is what you need to do. Read this text, right? And some, especially people who are self-learners, they may not understand that because they've always been very disciplined and very self-motivated. But there is a lot of people who want to do something, but they like that extra push, or someone who actually gives them a framework to work on. that they don't have to actually research themselves.
Right.
And it could be like people who have a lot of work, they work for corporations, they're just so tired that they have no time for anything else. But if you know that you come back home and you have everything prepared for you, the whole activity, you just need to focus on that, you're more likely to do that than let's start to research now what I need to do to learn a language, It just takes away your motivation.
Yeah, you spend a lot of time figuring out the how, but you should just really get started. It's the analysis paralysis of language learning.
Yes, absolutely.
Keep studying it. Well, that's great. I mean, we talked a lot about teaching now and how people can get into that, and I think it's a great way to get started, especially if you're young and you're in university or something. You have some spare time, do a little bit on the side, and maybe you'll get hooked like you did and other people have done in the past. What would be your top tips, just to round off today? What would be your top tips for the students or the learners of languages, of what, in terms of learning the language? Obviously that has to happen as well. What would be sort of top 5 tips
for language learners?
Yeah, exactly. So we just flip it around now, and the people attending the lessons.
Well, definitely you need a lot of input. That's the key thing in learning a language. And I would say comprehensible input, but maybe most of the people know that term already. And I got it when I was in Mexico. I feel like it was comprehensible because I was participating in those discussions. I knew context more or less, or I knew my friends. I knew what they were talking about. It was somewhat comprehensible to me. So try to surround yourself with the language as much as possible. At some point, sooner than later, start watching TV shows, your favorite TV shows in your target language. I, for example, started a few months ago, I started watching my favorite show that I watched in English before, and now I rewatched it with Spanish dubbing. And I watched all 5 seasons. And I was crying at the end of the last episode because, I really understood enough to be able to cry at the end, to understand the seriousness of the situation. So yeah, that's very important. And I mean, important. It's just it's very effective, I believe. And I learned so many words that I didn't realize I could learn by watching the show.
Yeah, and I guess the good part about the watching shows you already know is that you kind of know what's happening. So it's not completely like if you watch something where you don't understand anything and you've never watched it in any language, it can be quite boring to sit down and try and watch a show. But because you had that experience from the other language, you kind of know the story, and then you can focus on the language and compare to how it was in the original.
Yes, and because there were 5 seasons, so it's not like you remember everything what happened, you just you remember the general outline of the story, but when you keep watching it, you're actually excited. Oh, I forgot about this, and then it's kind of reinforcing the language you're learning. It's really cool.
And some of these shows are pretty much designed to be watched over and over anyway. I mean, how many years have you seen Friends on TV, for instance? It's just been going on and on and on and on. So most fans of the show will know every episode inside out, probably, but they still watch it because they like it. So that can definitely be a good way to do it. So how with the lessons? So basically, you said outside. This is outside the lessons. You're getting a lot of input, and then for the lessons themselves, the teacher, obviously, be motivated, do the homework, do what the teacher tells you, basically, I guess is the kind of the tip.
I mean, but you need to be like a critical thinker as well. You know what? I mean, from the perspective of a learner, always give feedback to your teacher. That's the key thing. Because your teacher has a lot of assumptions because he's been working in this field for years, and sometimes he's on autopilot.
Sure.
But and so we as teachers, we cannot predict what kind of person you are, especially when we are starting to work with you. So the more feedback you give, the better your teacher is able to prepare for the next lesson,
Right.
and adapt to your needs. So be more self-aware about how you learn, or when you're looking at when you are analyzing how your most recent lesson went, just think about it and make a list of things that you would like to change, or things that you really enjoyed and things that you didn't enjoy that much, and let your teacher know. That could definitely improve your lessons in the future. Hopefully the teacher would consider that. But because the other things you can do, there is not much that you can do, because the teacher is in charge of the lesson.
Yeah.
So
you find another teacher if you don't like the one you have.
Yeah,
I guess.
you can do that,
You
but
stick with
but if you really want to stick to this teacher, and actually, if you keep changing your teachers as well, without giving them feedback, there is no way that you maybe when you are lucky, you might find someone who actually matches your needs, but without giving feedback, it's very hard.
Well, I totally agree, and that happened to me when I was in my Russian lessons. I was starting out very slowly because I was completely new to the language, so we would speak extremely slow to each other. But because of that, we would have conversations extremely early, like an hour-long conversation, which was really exciting. I mean, obviously, we didn't fill maybe 15 minutes of normal speed, but still, it was exciting. But then after a few months of doing that, I told my teacher, I said, I'd like to try a little bit faster now, because I think I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, okay, well, I didn't know. I thought you still wanted this. And then she sped up dramatically. And I would say I was surprised at how much I understood. And we were able to kind of supercharge the learning from there, because I wasn't taking ages for every sentence anymore. But she would have never known unless I had told her. Because obviously just because I speak really slowly doesn't mean that I don't understand her when she speaks faster. But obviously she has no way of knowing that. So I just told her, and the lessons were great after that. So that's a big tip there. Just give as much feedback as you can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That would be one great tip of today. I think if you implement that, that's definitely gonna
if you
change
do one
something.
thing with this podcast, you will do well. Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much, Norbert, for sharing your story and the different areas. The travel, learning, and teaching is kind of like the trifecta of this podcast. So it's great to hear from someone who has great experience in all of the areas, and I'm sure there are lots of people out there who are perhaps more excited about their upcoming lessons, or even people looking to get into teaching. So thank you for taking the time with me today.
Or thank you for having me, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. Where can people, if they want to find out more about you or get in touch, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me on my website, ecolinguist.com, or through my YouTube channel, Ecolinguist. I post quite a bit of stuff recently there, so you're welcome to check it out.
Fantastic. So that's ecolinguist.com.
Mm-hmm. Eco, like ecology. Mm-hmm. Ecological linguistics. Ecolinguist. That's a very interesting story behind it, but maybe for another time.
Always good to save something for the next appearance, definitely. Or people can go and find out on your website or channel, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely.
The answers will be there. So perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. I really appreciate having you here today. Just before you leave, I just want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is italki. Italki is a tutoring platform where you can find affordable tutors for every language in the world, pretty much. So get started today and get a free $10 credit when you book your first lesson. If you go to actualfluency.com/italki, and that's spelled ITALKI. So give it a go and feel how tutoring can really boost and enhance your language learning.